If you are a person who struggles to set boundaries, then this video is for you. I'm Amy and welcome to my channel. This channel is all around spirituality and psychology around relationships. I'm a certified attachment style coach, and in this video I'm going to discuss why it is that you might really struggle to set boundaries in your relationships, and also a really good reframe for you to take on so that you can actually start prioritizing your own needs and boundaries. So let's get into the reasons why somebody might find it hard to set a boundary. This typically happens if you have an anxious attachment style or a fearful avoidant attachment style leaning towards anxious. And the reason for this is it's driven by the abandonment wound. So it's driven by this fear of abandonment. So for example, if I set a boundary, I'm going to be disliked and then I'll be abandoned. And this was what happened to me. I didn't want to set boundaries. It wasn't that I didn't particularly know what treatment I liked and what I didn't like. It was more that I couldn't communicate those boundaries without the fear of somebody overstepping them anyway, of being ignored. There would be conflict around it, and then I'd be abandoned. So I went through life pretty boundaryless, and in all of my relationships, I had no boundaries until these invisible boundaries that I had would get overstepped over and over and over again. I would just scream the boundary at somebody and make things 10 times worse. So if this is you, and you maybe even don't know what your boundaries are, which is another matter entirely. I'll go through that in a different video, how to actually identify what your boundaries are. But your boundaries are essentially your yeses and nos, what you like, what you dislike, who you are as a person. And your boundaries are there to keep you safe in relationships and outside of your relationships as well. You might have financial boundaries that you set with yourself. You might have boundaries around your career and your workplace. But for individuals that have this pervasive fear of abandonment, it is hard to set boundaries, because if you set a boundary, you are going to have to show up for it. So there's problems with the two steps of a boundary. Number one, that you find it hard to communicate the boundary in the first place. And number two is the fear of actually having to show up for that boundary and face possible abandonment. But you do need boundaries. And there isn't really any way that you can get around this if you want a secure relationship. You can't people please your way into a relationship either. There is no point in being in a relationship where you're bending over backwards and you're saying yes all the time and not really getting your needs met from the other person. And it might be that you're afraid to actually communicate that boundary. If you're with a partner who is avoidant, you're going to have a really hard time getting your needs met if you're not communicating clearly and expressing yourself really clearly. So if it is that you're anxious, attached, or fearful avoidant, you can see how boundaries in relationships and communication in relationships can be particularly challenging. So the first thing is identifying what your boundaries are. The second thing is actually realistically thinking, am I prepared to set this boundary and show up for it? Because if you're not prepared to show up for it, that isn't a boundary, it's just a threat. So let's say you had a partner that consistently held the security of the relationship over your head, and you decide to set a boundary around that. Maybe you say to this person that when you do this, I feel really unsafe in this relationship. If this happens again, I'm going to leave this relationship. You have actually got to be able to show up for that. Otherwise, it's not a boundary, it's just a threat. And if it is that you're consistently not showing up for that boundary, then the other person is going to take advantage of that. And I can speak from experience, the other person will take advantage of that, particularly if you're with somebody who has a personality type where they tend to push boundaries and where they are quite self-centered. It isn't going to go well for you. So you need to be able to set a boundary and show up for it. And another big reason why you don't set a boundary is to do with your relationship to yourself. So I want you to think about something or someone that you really value. So it might be a child, it could be a pet, it could be a parent, it could be a friend. And imagine if somebody disrespected that person. How would you feel? You'd probably have something to say about it. I know that I would. And the reason for that is because you really value that thing or person. And because you really value it, you find it easy and natural to set boundaries around that thing. So me as a mother, for example, my boundaries around whatever it is to do with my child come naturally because I value him so much. Now, what the difference is when it comes to boundaries to yourself, if you can't set boundaries for yourself, or if you struggle to keep boundaries with yourself, it partially comes down to how much you actually value yourself. And I know that this is a bitter pill to swallow, because we'd all like to think that we value ourselves that much that we wouldn't let anybody hurt us in some way, whether that's physically, emotionally. We wouldn't allow that to happen. And when we do allow that to happen, all we are telling ourselves is that we are not valued. I don't value myself. Because if you did value yourself, boundaries would come naturally to you. So this is something that you can really work around, because actually you do have innate value. Your feelings are valuable. Your thoughts are valuable. Your skills and talents are valuable. Your body is valuable. And I want you to really work on your sense of value in yourself. And I watched a video the other day actually with Matthew Hussey, where he explained really, really simply, I think it was the simplest explanation that I had ever heard. And he said, imagine when you are born, you are given a human that you have to take care of for life. And that human is your responsibility. So me as Amy is my responsibility. I am responsible for keeping Amy safe. I am responsible for meeting Amy's needs. I am responsible for valuing Amy. So if anything happens that disrespects Amy, that hurts Amy in some way, I am responsible for protecting her. And when you can think of it in this way, actually it becomes quite easy to value yourself. It becomes quite easy to see the ways that you are indeed valuable. And when you can do this, boundary setting is going to become easier and naturally because you value yourself. So I hope you found that video helpful. If you need more personal support, my email is in the bio, and I will see you in the next video.